They told us the war was over. But to a man standing on the train platform with a cardboard suitcase and calloused hands, it didn't feel that way. The factories still roared. The smoke still hung low over the valley. The world hadn't gone quiet, it had only changed its rhythm. I came home in the spring of 1946, stepping off a troop train into a town that barely looked like the one I'd left. The mill where I'd worked before the war was busier than ever, only now, instead of rivets for planes, we were making toasters and washing machines. Same machines, different dreams. The first thing I noticed was how full everything felt: stores, sidewalks, the future itself. America, they said, was ready to lead the world. But out there on Main Street, what it looked like was people ready to live again. There was a feeling, something electric in the air. You could almost taste it. The war had ended, and suddenly everyone believed in tomorrow. Men who'd seen too much wanted to build homes. Women who'd carried the nation on their shoulders wanted to decorate kitchens. Kids who'd grown up on ration stamps now dreamed of television sets and shiny cars. And America somehow had the means to give it to them. They called it the boom. But for us, it was just life moving forward. The G-bill gave me a chance to go to school. I'd never thought about college before, folks like me didn't, but now Uncle Sam said we'd earned it. So I studied engineering by day and worked nights fixing radios. I still remember the hum of the tubes, that warm orange glow that filled the little workshop. Every radio I fixed felt like a heartbeat, like I was helping the country find its pulse again. By 1948, the town had doubled in size. New houses stretched out past the old dirt roads, every one painted the same cheerful white. They called it suburbia, rows of small dreams lined up neatly behind picket fences. I bought my first car that year, a '47 Chevrolet, and I swear it felt like the future itself was waiting on the other side of the windshield. Factories turned from war machines to miracle machines. The same assembly lines that had once rolled out tanks now rolled out refrigerators. Tires that had carried jeeps across France now spun under families heading to picnics. Even the newspapers sounded different, less about battles, more about babies and baseball. The world had burned, and somehow America had come out shining brighter than before. I don't think any of us saw it as becoming a superpower. That was a word for generals and politicians. For us, it was about comfort, warm bread in the oven, a light that turned on when you flipped a switch, the simple miracle of having enough. But now, looking back, I see it more clearly. The strength that built bombers didn't just vanish, it turned inward, into homes, highways, and hope. We weren't conquering nations anymore. We were conquering everyday life. My brother Sam started a small appliance store, Future Electric, he called it. He sold radios, fans, mixers, anything that plugged in. Business was so good he could barely keep up with orders. People wanted the new, the modern, the effortless. They wanted to forget, and somehow, that forgetting became the engine that pushed us forward. Sometimes, at night, I'd sit on the porch and listen to the radio soft jazz playing from a faraway station. The announcer talking about this new thing called television. He said someday everyone would have one. I laughed. Who'd want to stare at a box when they could be outside? But within a few years, that box would change everything. You could feel it coming, the sense that America wasn't just recovering anymore. We were accelerating. Our cars went faster. Our homes grew larger. Our ideas stretched further. The world looked to us for answers. And for the first time in history, it felt like we might actually have them. The flags on every front porch didn't just mean victory anymore. They meant possibility. By the summer of 1949, the world around us had turned into one long construction site. Everywhere you looked, there were hammers, ladders, fresh paint. A nation that had once fought across oceans was now busy building fences, porches, and driveways, if you listened closely. You could hear it, the heartbeat of a country remaking itself. They said America was entering a golden age. Back then, it just felt like Saturday afternoon. Men mowed lawns while women hung laundry on perfect white lines. And kids rode bicycles down brand new streets with names like Maple Lane and Liberty Drive. Every street light that flickered on after dusk felt like a small victory over the darkness we'd all known. I found work at a plant that made parts for television sets. Imagine that, a factory once dedicated to radar equipment now building something meant only to entertain. The engineers talked about the future the way preachers talk about heaven. They said one day there'd be a television in every home in America. I wasn't sure I believed them until I saw how people stared through the store window at the glowing screens. Baseball news, a smiling host promising that life itself could be sponsored by detergent. You could almost feel the world shrinking, the distance between towns, between lives, collapsing into a single flicker of light. My wife, Helen, would come by the plant after work with sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. We'd sit outside on the curb and watch the trucks roll by, each one carrying another piece of the future. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked once. "What, this, everything, the building, the buying, the feeling that nothing can stop us?" I looked out at the horizon where cranes swung like slow metal birds and said, "It has to. We've got too much hope invested in it." Hope was our new currency. The banks loaned it, the newspapers printed it, and we spent it every single day. In 1950, the Korean War began, and for a while it felt like the world might slip backward. Men were drafted again, headlines darkened. But even then, the assembly lines never really stopped. War, peace, it all seemed to run on the same oil. America had learned how to turn fear into fuel. We produced, we sold, we believed. Back home, I built a small workshop in our garage. The G-bill had given us a house, a mortgage we could handle, and space enough for dreams. I started tinkering little gadgets, timers, and radio antennas that picked up stations from 3 states away. Sometimes I'd sit with Helen and listen to far-off voices floating through static, thinking how strange it was that we could hear the world so easily when once it had felt so impossibly large. By 1952, we finally had our own television. A 14-inch Zenith, wood frame polished like fine furniture. The night we brought it home, half the neighborhood came over just to see the picture. When the screen came to life, grainy, flickering, miraculous, someone whispered, "We're looking straight into tomorrow." And in a way we were. That little glowing box changed everything. It told us what to buy, what to believe, what to dream about. It made the world smaller but our expectations bigger. Politicians realized it could win elections, preachers realized it could fill pews, and children realized heroes could live right in their living rooms. Sometimes, late at night, I'd turn it off and listen to the silence afterward. It was deeper somehow, as if the house itself was catching its breath. The glow would fade, and the reflection of my face would linger on the dark screen, older than I remembered. Looking back now, I think that's when America truly became something larger than a country. It became an idea, a rhythm of engines, neon, and unshakable belief. We built not just machines but myths. Every commercial, every headline told us the same thing: there's no limit to what we can make. We started the decade with scars and ended it with confidence so bright it sometimes blinded us, but at the time we didn't question it. We were too busy building, buying, dreaming. The factories hummed through the night. Televisions glowed in windows like small lighthouses, guiding the world toward something new. And though none of us knew the word superpower, we could feel it taking shape in the hum of an engine, the buzz of a screen, the heartbeat of a generation that believed the future was already here. By 1955, the map of America was changing faster than anyone could keep up. Highways cut through farmland like silver ribbons. Motels rose where there used to be fields. and neon signs began to glow brighter than the stars themselves. People said the country was on the move, and for once, they weren't just talking about cars. Helen and I bought our first set of luggage that year, hard shell Samsonite, pale blue. It wasn't for any particular trip, just because people were traveling now. The magazines called it the Freedom Age, and it sure looked like it every Sunday. The newspapers were filled with photos of smiling families in shiny convertibles. Wind in their hair, the open road stretching endlessly ahead. We packed a lunch and decided to join them one weekend. Just a short drive, we said maybe 50 miles west, to see the new highway they'd built. But once we got on it, something strange happened. We didn't want to stop. Mile after mile, the road unwound like a story that refused to end. Gas stations sparkled, diners served pie with whipped cream thick as snow, and billboards promised everything from air conditioning to the American dream itself. And for a few hours, I think we believed them all. They called it the interstate system. Eisenhower said it was for safety, for defense, for moving troops if the need ever came again. But to us, it felt like a lifeline connecting towns, families, futures. Factories could send goods farther, faster. People could chase jobs, opportunities, and sometimes just curiosity. A neighbor of mine, George, used to say the road built America more than the war ever did. At the time I laughed, but now I think he was right. The war had taught us to organize, to build, to think big. The highways just gave us somewhere to go. Everywhere you looked, there was motion. Airplanes filled the skies, sleek jets replaced the old propellers. Companies went global, sending their products and their confidence overseas. America had found its rhythm, and it sounded like an engine running smooth. Helen got a job at a travel agency downtown. She'd come home with brochures of Paris, Tokyo, London, places that once felt like names from another world. Now they were only a plane ticket away. Imagine, she'd say, flipping through the glossy pages, a world this small. I'd smile, but deep down I wondered if small was really what we wanted. Progress was a hungry thing. It fed on ambition, on invention, on the belief that tomorrow had to be bigger than today. And for a while, that seemed fine. The factories kept humming, television ads kept smiling. And the skyline of every city reached a little higher each year. But sometimes, when I drove home from the plant at night, I'd notice the horizon glowing orange, not from the sunset, but from the refineries and street lights burning all night long. I remember thinking that we'd traded stars for neon, and I wasn't sure which one would last longer. Still, we were proud. We'd turned a nation of farms into a powerhouse of production. Steel, oil, cars, appliances, if it could be made, America made it. We exported not just goods but an idea that comfort was the truest form of success. And the world was buying. I'll never forget the day the first foreign visitors toured our factory. They were from Japan, I think, young men in neat suits, taking notes on everything. Our manager shook their hands proudly, explaining every process, every machine. They want to learn from us, he said afterward, beaming, and they did. But years later, I'd watch television ads for cars and radios made overseas, and realize they learned faster than anyone expected. That was the thing about progress, it didn't belong to anyone for long. It was like a spark, passed from hand to hand, lighting everything it touched. And sometimes, that light was hard to control. By the late 50s, we were living in the height of it all. New homes, new cars, new dreams every year. The newspapers said America had half the world's wealth and almost all of its confidence. We were the leaders now, the example, the engine. But I'd sit on my porch at dusk, the highway humming in the distance, and feel a strange stillness. Maybe it was just age. Or maybe I was starting to wonder what we'd built all this speed for. We could reach anywhere now, but I wasn't sure we knew where we were going. Helen would bring me a glass of lemonade and smile. "Don't think so hard," she'd say, "enjoy what we've made." And I tried. God knows I did. Because for all the questions that lingered, there was still beauty in it: the glow of headlights rolling past, the laughter from the house next door, the sound of a country that believed in its own heartbeat. By the time the 1960s rolled in, the world had gone color. Television no longer flickered in black and white, and neither did our lives. Everything felt brighter, louder, faster, like someone had turned up the volume on the whole country. The cars gleamed in candy red and chrome, air conditioners hummed in every window. Men wore suits to mow the lawn, and every house had a flag fluttering out front, as if to say, "We made it." America was at the top of the world, and you could feel it. But I was getting older. And sometimes, sitting on that same porch where I'd listened to the radio as a boy, I wondered if we'd built something too big to hold. The highways that once felt endless now buzzed with traffic. The factories that had made us rich were starting to fill the sky with smoke. Even the air seemed tired, like it was catching its breath after 20 years of running. Helen used to say the country was growing up the same way we were: proud, complicated, and a little unsure of what came next. She was right. The newspapers were full of change: civil rights marches, space rockets, protests, promises. The same spirit that once built everything now wanted to question everything, and maybe that was the truest sign of our strength. A superpower, I realized, isn't measured in weapons or money. It's measured in how much truth it can face without falling apart. When President Kennedy spoke about the moon, I remember standing in the living room, my hand on the television, feeling the hum of the words through the wood. He said we'd go not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I thought, that's the America I know. Not the one chasing comfort, but the one chasing challenge. That summer, Helen and I drove to the coast to see the ocean again. It was the first time we'd taken the trip since the war ended. The highways were smooth now, 4 lanes wide, lined with diners, motels, and billboards for products I couldn't even pronounce. But the horizon was the same steady blue, the same endless line that reminded me how small we really are. We sat on the sand, shoes off, wind in our hair, and watched the tide roll in. She reached for my hand and said softly, "Remember when we thought this was all temporary?" I nodded. "Everything is eventually." We both smiled. It wasn't sad. It was true. When Helen passed in 1971, the house felt unbearably quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint crackle of the TV, none of it could fill the silence she left behind. But every night, when the street lights came on and the highway lights glowed in the distance, I'd remember the years we'd built together, the laughter, the struggle, the hope. We'd lived through the making of a giant and somehow managed to stay human inside it. I kept working until I couldn't anymore. The factory changed hands 3 times, and most of the machines I'd once operated were replaced by computers. I'd walk through the aisles on my last day, running my hand along the cold metal frames, thinking how everything we make eventually outgrows us. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how progress stays alive, by passing us by. Now, when I see the world on a glowing screen that fits in the palm of my hand, I can't help but think how it all began. A few men with ideas, a country with determination, and millions of ordinary folks like me who just wanted to build something worth believing in. We didn't set out to make a superpower. We just wanted to make breakfast easier, travel quicker, evenings brighter. But somewhere along the way, the small things became the big things. Our inventions turned into industries, our homes turned into symbols, and our dreams, those quiet, personal dreams, became the foundation of a nation that learned how to lead. Sometimes I still hear the factory whistle in my memory, the one that called us in each morning, long before sunrise. It sounded like duty then. Now it sounds like history. America didn't become a superpower overnight. It became one in moments and hands that built, hearts that hoped, and voices that believed we could do better. Even when we stumbled, we got up again. Even when we doubted, we kept moving forward. And maybe that's all a superpower really is. A country and a people that never stop trying to turn tomorrow into something worth waking up for. If this story brought back a memory, a feeling, or a piece of yesterday, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click, every comment helps keep these stories alive, reminding us who we were and how far we've come.